I build model roller coasters out of K'NEX, but there's a lot more to the amusement park industry than just coasters. There's flat rides, thrill rides, and all sorts of other attractions that can be found at any local park. So, I was thinking it would be cool to try and build a K'NEX amusement park with some of these other attractions. But that won't mean there won't be coasters. Coasters will still be at the top of my list in my park, with a huge secret coaster idea that I have. It's been forever since I built anything other than a coaster out of K'NEX, which should make for a fun challenge. Another big reason that I'm doing this is so that I can experiment with different coaster types at a smaller scale. And lastly, I am terrible at names, so I'm looking for some name suggestions for the park, coasters, and anything else that could have a name. So, what is the first ride that comes to mind when you think of an amusement park? For me, the first ride other than a coaster is the Ferris Wheel. So that's what I'm going to build first. I started with the base, and it's quite simple. Just a platform with some connectors for the future supports. Speaking of the supports, here they are. The next thing I built was the axle for the wheel to spin on. The black 8-sided connectors are what the wheel and supports are attached to. There's also a gear for the future spinning mechanism. You may have noticed that I left a little bit of the base empty. This is for the gear ratio. It's simply just a large gear and a small gear, which will make the wheel spin slower. I also added a couple of smaller extra supports. Next, I built up 16 supports for the wheel. Each one will eventually hold up their own car. I then built up a test car. This was surprisingly difficult, but I think the end result is decent. After I came up with the design, I built 16 more for the actual wheel. It took me almost an hour to build 16 cars, but I think it was worth it. The last thing I had to do was make it a circle. And with that, the first ride of my K'NEX amusement park is complete. It was really fun to design something other than a coaster, and I think the end result is perfect for my park. With the Ferris wheel done, the next logical step is to build a coaster. But what type of coaster? A big part of this series is that I can experiment with different types of coasters on a smaller scale. With that in mind, I think the perfect coaster is going to be a Vekoma/B&M Family Invert. Yes, I'm kind of taking inspiration from both. I've wanted to have another go at an invert ever since I built Banshee over a year ago. This one won't be as large or anything, but it still should be really fun. I started with the lift motor and gear ratio. You may notice that this extra gear here can move up and down. I'll explain that later. Another thing is, I'm going to try and use some smaller tube supports for this model. I feel like the normal size ones are just way too big for microtrack, so I'm using this design with a 2A connector and 3 gray rods. I was also working on the lift structure. I was able to add in a bunch of detail with cross braces for extra stability. Then I brought in the biggest supports. On the right is where the gear for the chain is. I noticed that a lot of family inverts had a turn at the top of the hill, so my model will have this as well. Then, with the track and chain installed, the lift is done. I can now show you guys what this extra gear here does. So basically, there's a lot of just extra chain like up there, and so what happens is when the car runs, it's gonna bring this chain up with it. So there's this extra like floppy bit, and what's happening is since there's just too much, so it's gonna slip on the gear with the motor. So this basically just lowers it down, and then when it hits this part here, you can see how the gear raises. So then there's enough chain for it to go on that part there. Another solution to this problem would be just have the chain wrap around like this rather than coming up and then over. That's what I did with my Banshee recreation, so I didn't have to have the extra gear. So either way, the lift is working. With the lift done, I started on the drop. At the top, there's that small right turn that I mentioned earlier. I'm not really sure why, but it makes the lift look so much cooler. Anyway, the supports for the drop are basically the same as the lift, only smaller. Something else I'm going to work on during this series is on the base. I spend way too many of the red and gray rods on it when I should be using them for the structure. So hopefully building a bunch of smaller coasters, I can get used to using the blue and yellow rods more. Turns out the lift didn't work. Thankfully, I just needed to add in some rubber bands to get it to work. With the lift and drop working, I started construction on the first element, which is an overbank turn. There's not a lot to say about this, but I did want to mention that for the extra cross braces, I did just use a single rod to save on parts. You may have noticed that the train was moving pretty quick on that test. At first, I was using different trains, but they're moving way too slow, so I changed them to these ones, and I didn't really feel like changing the layout. After the turn, there's a little airtime hill, and then the track dips down and goes into an inclined loop thing. It was quite a challenge to build inside the supports of the lift, and the coaster being an invert didn't really help. For the final few elements, I wanted a more twisted section, so I built another sort of overbank and a helix. I was quite surprised at how much speed that I still had, as I was able to build an upward helix and the train maintained its speed very well. The layout finishes with a couple of turns into a straight bit where a station will eventually go. I'm not going to build a station or any details until later to save on parts. Or rather, save parts now and use what I have left in the future. So it is now done. This is honestly like one of my favorite roller coasters that I've ever built. It was super quick, took me like 6 hours. I may switch out the cars, I may switch them out to the inverted ones, but it's working now and I don't want it to not work with. Anyway, now we have that, a Ferris wheel, and then that is coming soon. So I'd like name ideas for this roller coaster because I am terrible at names. Anyway, thanks for watching.